Hello, and welcome back to 6++. Today we are going to be having a bit of a deep dive into Drukhari Anti-tank options. Or as I've said it, Drukhari Anti-tank. What is your poison? Now, lore lovers, I'm aware poison's the anti-infantry stuff. I get it, it fits, it's a pun. Bear with me. So yeah, as I say, today we're going to jump into some Drukhari Anti-tank options, have a little discuss around them, try and work out average damage outputs, and work onwards from there. So, sort of three obvious ones that jump to mind are Scourge, so 130 points for 5 models. We have Talos, 160 points for 2 models, and Ravager, which is now 100 points after the latest balance update. So I wanted to cover this after Ravagers came down in points, and there was a little bit of a question as what's your anti-tank choice? Does a Ravager replace a Scourge now? Does a Talos replace a Scourge? And we'll cover that today. So I do have some honourable mentions to sort of count on before we move forward. So Court of the Archon. Now this is the Court of the Archon with the 5 good gun cabalites, so Dart Lance Blaster, Shredder Splinter Cannon, Blast Pistol from the Sergeant, and Grenade plus Archon. So this can hurt any unit, right? Like, this is not just an anti-tank option, it's not just anti-infantry option, it can do anything into any unit. Solid unit, great use choice. Then we've got Incubi with Archon or Drazar. Now Incubi with Archon, I would probably say that is better off in Sky Splinter with a +1 to wound, and that thing punches up. My word, 10-man brick of Incubi with an Archon, full hit and wound rerolls, that does some damage. Now, a little bit along the same veins, we've got Drazar with like 5 Incubi. It's probably not the best tool for it, but always giving them the +1 to wound. They do some work, but they do suffer from not having those reroll wounds. With one of my favourite Drukhari units, the Void Raven Bomber. This guy's great. So he does have some anti-tank missile options, which are sort of like strength 14, AP 4, D6 +2 damage. He gets 4 shots, I believe it is, or 2 shots, one or the other. This is obviously just a great anti-tank gun, but I do quite like with them with the dark scythes, and in Reaper's Wager, spending lethal hits with a pain token, that can absolutely start taking out light vehicles, your rhinos, your predators, things like that. It can start taking those out quite efficiently with lethal hits. However, it does just get clapped back, and it's not really a dedicated anti-tank choice. We have Skyweavers and Voidweavers from the Harlequin side of things. These are a little bit lackluster, if in all honesty, but with reroll 1 to hit and wound in Reaper's Wager, they can do some work, and Haywire Cannons are just universally quite good into tanks, right? And I want to mention anti-tank, obviously. There's a little bit of a question here about monsters as well. So Haywires aren't necessarily as good into monsters, but just as a little heads up. Then there is Hellions and Witches with the Succubus. Again, both these in Reaper's Wager with lethal hits can do a massive amount of damage to any sort of target. So Hellions specifically, with lethal hits and a pain token, do something like 20 wounds to a big knight, which is a fair chunk out of a 26 wound body. On average, roughly on average, it's AP2 damage too. So they are our honourable mentions. So let's move on into a deeper dive into our units. So we have Scourge. Scourge have been a staple of Drukhari for the majority of the edition now. They are, let's say, 130 points now for what is essentially 5 toughness, 3 1 wound bodies with a 4 of save, 5 of invulnerable. However, they have many weapon options here. They can take blasters, dart lances, haywire cannons, splinter cannons, shredders, heat lances. There's so many options there for them to take. They're just very good. Now, what makes them so good is their special rule, their move after shooting 6 inches. This allows them to come out, shoot, bugger off again. So they're not, ideally, with a Scourge unit, you get 5 turns of shooting out of it, ideally. Now, indirect can sometimes put a bit of a kibosh on that, which no one wants. But otherwise, they move 14 inches, they're infantry, so they can go through walls. They have the grenades keyword. They also have deep strike, which can be quite useful in some edge cases, particularly with those with indirect fire, guard, death guard, etc. They do have some pretty good stratagem support in Reaper's Wager, not so much in the other detachments in Real Space Raiders and Sky Splinter Assault, but they do have a place in both of those detachments. But stratagem support is what I'm talking about, is on a haywire loadout Scourge, giving those sustained hits can really pump their averages up. Now we do cover some average damage totals later, and I've not done the maths on with sustained, but it can massively improve the output on a haywire Scourge unit into any sort of vehicle. So after we've done the Scourge, we move on to the Talos. Now, Talos, they're obviously reasonably tough for an elf model. They are toughness 7, 7 wounds, 3 up save, with a 6 up invulnerable save, and a 5 up feel no pain. These guys can take a little bit of punishment. Not loads, but a little bit. And sometimes can be tankier than I think your opponent respects them for. They also have many weapon options, and unlike Scourge, they are fairly multifaceted. They can do combat, they can do anti-infantry, they can do anti-tank. So they've got options of the haywire twin-linked haywire blasters, twin-linked splinter cannon, twin-linked and a twin-linked heat lance on their tail weapons. They can take a twin-linked liquefier gun, which I recommend you always take a twin-linked liquefier, and then a plethora of combat options as well, which I think 90% of the time, I don't think I've seen anyone go anywhere else other than the Talos Gauntlet at strength 8, AP2, damage 3, 5 attacks each. Again, these are another unit that hits on 4s, so they do need some pain tokens early doors. But first time they kill a unit entirely, they are empowered for the rest of the game, which can really spike their efficiency and your efficiency in your pain token economy. They also do have fairly great use across a couple of the detachments. So Real Space Raiders, obviously, they have access to the -1 to be wounded, which can just a fairly decent durability boost. And then in Reaper's Wager, obviously, advanced shoot and charge can really affect how these guys get about the board and actually get them into the game that little bit quicker. They are only moving 7 inches, and they are monsters, so they can't walk through walls, so they can be a little bit sluggish to get around and positioned. They also work really quite well coming out of strategic reserves with a rapid ingress, or even straight up just come in to shoot their haywire cannons. But again, I think the loadout we'll talk about here with them is most likely the haywire cannons, but we'll look at the damage averages with a heat lance too, and discuss sort of which one is better and why. And then lastly, we have the Ravager. Now, the Ravager is a vehicle. It moves 14 inches. It's toughness 9. It's a 4 up save with a 6 up invulnerable save. It's 11 wounds, and it does have OC 3. It can take 3 guns, so either 3 dart lance or 3 disintegrator cannon. Now, unfortunately, I don't think you will ever see disintegrator cannons this edition. That stat profile is appalling, really. It's pretty bad, and I don't think it's one that's ever going to be efficient. But this chassis is extremely cheap at 100 points. If you look to compare that to something like a Void Weaver, that's 125 points, and doesn't do as much damage as a Ravager can. So their low points cost makes them great. Also, you don't necessarily mind about losing them at 100 points, so they can play a little bit more aggressively. They do also have deep strike, so again, another good one that could come in from rapid ingress or just arrive on the board. With good shooting angles, hopefully, on the majority of terrain formats. As we've covered, there's only sort of one real weapon option there that you would really consider on a Ravager, but which is a shame. I'm not really sure how they changed disintegrated cannons to make them better. Maybe strength 6 to strength 8, damage 3. That might make them an option, but otherwise they're pretty appalling on those disintegrators. Again, these are pretty universally decent across all three detachments. Stratagem support wise, they do get an access to a 4-up invulnerable save in Sky Splinter Assault, which can massively boost. This is only a range in ranged output. This can massively boost their durability and their annoyingness to remove from the board. Okay, so that's sort of like the three main options for anti-tank. So let's move on to do some damage profiles, damage averages, and some common enemy profiles we might see out there in the meta at the moment. So currently we have some big knights. Now Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights are running around with 5 to 6 big knights each, and it is disgusting. We have a lovely picture of Canis Rex over here. So I've sort of just gone with the most common loadouts for each unit. So Scourge with Haywire, deal an average of 6 damage to a big knight, average of 9 with the pain token with the Haywire cannons. Again, that can pump up with sustained hits, so just be aware of that. Scourge with Dart Lance is an average of about 4 damage, and then 7 with a pain token. It's because of saves and hitting on 4s. Saves with cover it can really, AP3 can sort of skew that maths. We've got Talos with Haywire. They do sort of average of 3, 6 with a pain token. They are twin linked though, and again the sort of potential to spike on 4s is quite nice. Talos with the Heat Lance is sort of an average of 4 damage, 7 in Melter. With a pain token, it's fairly negligible output. But only having 1 shot each is a very, very swingy profile. And then lastly, we have our Ravagers with Dart Lances. So that is an average of 5 or 6 with the pain token. Now, don't shoot me for the maths. The maths is wrong. I used a website called Unit Crunch. It mostly felt right, but some of it might seem a bit skewy. Now we're going to notice something about the Haywires over these damage profiles into vehicles, but we'll get into that shortly. So amount of models slain into a Death Shroud Terminator unit. Scourge with Haywire is 0. Scourge with Dart Lance is 0 or 1 with the pain token. Talos with Haywire is 0. Talos with the Heat Lance is 0, 1 in Melter, or with the pain token. Pain token is negligible. And then Ravager with the Dart Lance is 0 or 1 with a pain token. Now, this doesn't take into account sort of twin linked, potentially spiking and fishing for 6s on the twin link with the Talos, twin linked Haywire. These are just averages, and realistically 1 unit of Scourge probably isn't killing a 4-wound Terminator. Rolling a double 6, you hit on 4s, so that is in theory 4 hits. You wounded on 6s, so you get maybe 1. So they're the averages there. We've got a Lehman Rush battle tank. There's a few of those about. Lots of guard players, lots of battle tanks. We don't want those. And again, look, we're seeing here these averages aren't really shifting all that much. Tanks at the top save with cover does affect our damage output. Haywire stays fairly consistent in that, but again, with opportunities to spike wounding on 4s and damage going straight through a vehicle is always great. Chaos Rhino, and again, I'm not going to keep reeling off the numbers because you can read them there. They stay relatively consistent. pretty much irrespective of the target. And I thought we'd just look at an X-Creen as well, just for a bit of monster, see what the monsters do. Now, obviously, Dart Lances and Heat Lances will do a little bit better here on average, because you're not relying on 6s to wound here. So this is sort of your standard 12 wound, 3 up save monster, toughness 10, I think, toughness 10, toughness 11. So these are. Haywire can always potentially do something, but ideally you want to be shooting your lances or heat lances, dark or heat lances, into your monsters. Again, much the same for demons, although fishing, potentially rolling 6s on Haywire and into demons with a 4 invulnerable save always is pretty nice. So then we're just going to talk about some detachment specific buffs to provide for all 3 of these units. So Real Space Raiders generally has much better pain token access across the detachment, because you start with 6. You can start with up to 6, assuming you have built the list correctly. You have access to -1 to be hit strat. Doesn't work on Talos. You can be -1 to be wounded, again only for Talos. Full wound rerolls for Cabal against below half strength targets. Now that is the Ravager, which is something. Obviously it has its own built-in ones to hit, and again other detachments give it, so that could be quite nice in terms of an efficiency boost. And then we have Strike and Fade, which is fairly universal, but that is a move again at the end of your shooting phase. This could be great for getting Ravagers back into safety, very similar to Scourge. It can be used on Scourge to do some quite nice plays. Getting a second 14-inch movement can be great at move blocking other units and controlling some space across the board. Moving on to Sky Splinter Assault. The detachment rule doesn't really provide any support for all 3 of these units, because none of them can be in transports and thus get out of them to receive the ignores cover and +1 to wound. However, what can benefit here is the Ravager. The Ravager can gain a 4 up invulnerable save, only against ranged attacks, but again it's just that potential little spike in durability, as is the way with 4 up invulnerable saves. If you just roll 4s, all will be fine. And then lastly we have Reaper's Wager. So Reaper's Wager, detachment wide, reroll 1s to hit now after the last data slate, and maybe reroll 1s to wound if you set it up right with having some Harlequins units to flip that wager, or even Conductor of Torment enhancement, where you can discard a pain token to get reroll 1s to wound. Which you may want to do in some cases. That might be something you include in there if you've got the points spare for Conductor. Having a Ravager with reroll 1s to hit and wound isn't a terrible thing. Most of the time you hit on 3s, wounded on 3s, so it's only those 2s that are going to really throw a spanner in the works. Having access to sustained or lethal hits on all 3 of these units is pretty solid in terms of lethality. Again, sustained hits on Haywire Scourge is probably the way you want to go with that. I don't really see using sustained or lethal on a Ravager, but definitely want to be using lethal hits on a Talos in combat. That thing will punch up. We have access to -1 to be hit whilst in combat. It's not amazing, it's 1 CP. This detachment is incredibly command point hungry. There's lots of great stratagems in here, as you'll probably notice, but there might be an edge case where this might keep your Scourge alive, or stops your Talos being murdered too. I think the big one about Reaper's Wager is no Overwatch. Those Scourge are extremely susceptible to getting overwatched, and particularly with Haywire, they have to get within Overwatch range. The great thing here is you can say, no sir, you cannot overwatch my Haywire cannons, and I am going to blast you for free and then jump back to safety. Very good stratagem, very strong for our Scourge. We also have a 2 CP reactive move in Reaper's Wager, which is only for infantry, so it only works on the Scourge, But again, just another one, you've perhaps mispositioned them ever so slightly, and someone's going to charge them. This can be good to just get them out of their way of that, or even perhaps put them within range of something that they might want to heroic intervene. It is 2 CP, however, and it is only a D6 move, or flat 6 if the wager is sitting in the right way. And then lastly, advanced shoot and charge. Again, pretty universally good. Gets Scourge further, gets Ravagers further. I think your best use case is probably on the Talos, the struggle for the mobility anyway. I think Scourge and Ravagers with 14 inches of movement, if positioned well enough, shouldn't struggle for those ranges. But it can still be useful to pull off move blocks, etc. So that's sort of the detachment specific buffs. So really, let's go and just sort of have an overview of this whole thing. So all these options are good, okay? I don't think there's a case where you'd say you'd take one over the other. I think these work well in tandem with each other. I think you need, not necessarily, you need at least 2 of the 3, I think, to really support that. And I think Scourge is probably, if you were to look at all 3 and say which is the best, I think Scourge is still the best unit for anti-tank output there. I think I'd be mindful of the detachment you want to play them in. Some of these detachments, obviously, as we just discussed, support these units better than others will. So just be mindful when building lists about what detachment you're putting in as to how much of something you take. For example, I don't think I'd be putting 6 Talos in a Sky Splinter assault list. I just don't think that they benefit that, but I probably would be chucking, 2 Scourge in, and maybe a Ravager now at 100 points, and I could pop a 4-up invul on. Be mindful that damage averages are just that. They may sometimes perform better or maybe even worse. And again, it's one of those where this is why we can't rely on only one unit. We are an army that does death by a million cuts, so just bear that in mind. But going in with a rough idea of how much a unit should do will make sure you don't under or overcommit. Not that overcommitting is a bad thing, unless it's with Scourge and you overcommit, kill something and it doesn't have another target to shoot. So just keep that in mind. Your terrain types may dictate your choices, your anti-tank choices here. I think some of these units will struggle on some terrain types, whereas others, Scourge for example, are great universally, I think. Whereas Talos, I think, struggle a little bit on UKTC, so just bear that in mind in the list building stage. What terrain are you playing on? Because this may decide which units actually make the cut for you. And then lastly, this is chapter approved 2025-26 season, and it is horrific out there. It is very hostile. We are entering a meta of murder, as I like to call it. Don't get left behind. Make sure you bring enough damage, and with these 3 units you've definitely got a solid damage output base there, filled in with some of our other good units, the Incubi, the Courts. We can build fairly solid lists into a wide range of this meta, so don't get left behind. Do not forget that damage. And that is it, guys. So thank you for tuning in. If you've got any thoughts, opinions, what's your favourite anti-tank? Do you like the Heatlands? Do you think Haywire is a load of tosh? Let me know in the comments below. Please do like, subscribe, and join us over on our Discord. Our Discord is absolutely thriving now. If you're looking for a game or any advice, feel free to ask any one of the content creators here. We're all fairly active in there, so please do feel free to jump on in and have a chat with us. Alright guys, thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye.